My name is Zara Blackwood, and I am 29 years old. As I sat at my parents' dining table that Christmas evening, I never imagined this particular holiday night would completely alter the trajectory of my life. Sebastian's cardiovascular practice is performing exceptionally well, my mother Vivienne announced while carving the turkey, her voice carrying that familiar mixture of concern and disappointment I had learned to recognize since I turned 12. Dominique just received her promotion to senior vice president at Morgan Stanley. I carefully placed my fork beside my plate. Mom, please. What is wrong with that? I am proud of my successful children, she paused, looking directly at me. Well, 2 out of 3 successful isn't bad, I suppose, though honestly, sometimes I think we should have stopped at 2 children. The third one was clearly a mistake. My brother-in-law Theodore set down his wine glass and leaned forward. Zara, my law firm is always in need of assistance. I could arrange an interview for you, or perhaps consider going back for an MBA. My sister-in-law Scarlett added with feigned gentleness. It is never too late to begin again. This was the standard protocol for Blackwood family Christmas dinners. The luxurious Greenwich, Connecticut estate, the finest china, perfect holiday decorations, and the systematic belittling of my life choices. My father Sterling is a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, while my mother Vivienne manages a charitable foundation. They raised 2 perfect children, my eldest sister Dominique, 35 years old, senior vice president in Morgan Stanley's wealth management division, married to another attorney, Theodore Ashworth, and my brother Sebastian, 32 years old, attending physician at Presbyterian Hospital, married to senior management consultant Scarlett Hayes. Blackwood, then there is me, the family problem, the one who needs fixing. Zara is still doing that mysterious technology work, Sebastian said with a grin while biting into a dinner roll. Freelance consultant, entrepreneur, digital nomad. What is it this time? I have a job. Sebastian, right, your mysterious technology job that you never explain. He took another bite of his roll. Mom, these rolls are perfect as always. Scarlett appeared, ushering their 7-year-old twins toward the cookie tray. Zara, I noticed on Facebook that you haven't updated your LinkedIn profile in 2 years. That is not good for job searching. If you'd like, I could help you optimize it. I took a personal branding workshop. She is just stubborn, Mom interjected. She has been doing this for 3 years now. 3 years working from home on that laptop, never explaining what she actually does. No steady salary. We can see this isn't sustainable. I had tried to explain once, during my first Christmas after leaving my position as senior software engineer at Microsoft to start Dataflow Solutions. I attempted to describe what we were building, a revolutionary data analytics platform, using machine learning to help healthcare systems predict patient outcomes and optimize resource allocation. Mom smiled politely, then asked if I had considered going back to school for nursing. Healthcare is stable, dear, and you'd be helping people. I am helping people, Mom. Our platform helps hospitals buy, but it is not a real job, is it? Working from your apartment, no office, no benefits. What happens if you get sick? What about retirement? That was 3 years ago. Since then, I had stopped trying to explain. Zara could come work at my practice, Sebastian suggested, lounging back in his chair. I need someone to manage the front desk. It is not glamorous, but it is stable. Benefits, paid vacation. That is very kind. Sebastian, I adjusted another ornament. But I am fine where I am. Where you are is nowhere, Dad said matter-of-factly, not maliciously, just stating what he saw as reality. You are spinning your wheels. At your age, your mother and I both had established careers, houses, savings. You are still living in that tiny apartment. No husband, no clear career path. My small apartment was actually a 2-bedroom loft in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, but they had only visited once briefly, mainly focusing on how I could better utilize the 2nd bedroom if I found a roommate to help with rent. I didn't bother correcting them. Dinner's almost ready, Mom announced. Zara, could you set the silverware? The dining room was already beautifully decorated. I began placing the silver while conversation drifted around me. Sebastian's thriving practice, his children's achievements in school, Scarlett's promotion to senior marketing director, my cousin's engagement to an attorney. What about you, Zara? Aunt Carol asked as we sat down to eat. She had just arrived wrapped in a fur coat and emanating perfume. What have you been up to lately? She is in a transitional period with opportunities, Mom said quickly, passing the mashed potatoes, but actively looking. I am not. The job market is so difficult, Aunt Carol said sympathetically. My neighbor's daughter was unemployed for 6 months. Finally found work at Starbucks. Not ideal, but at least it is income. Zara's situation is different, Dad added while carving the turkey. She has a degree, computer something. Computer science, I corrected. From MIT, right, so she is overqualified for most positions. But she doesn't have the practical experience employers want. He spoke as if I wasn't sitting right there. It is a difficult situation. Sebastian raised his wine glass. Here is hoping the new year brings better opportunities. They all toasted to that. I ate my turkey silently. After dinner, we returned to the living room. The television was on, some news channel playing holiday programming. Mom distributed gifts while Dad fiddled with the fireplace, trying to get the fire just right. This is for you, Zara. Mom handed me a wrapped box with a tone of condescending sympathy. This year we decided to give you something practically useful. I unwrapped the package to find a cheap, second-hand self-help book with a worn spine. The title read, Get Hired, 27 Ways to Land Job Interviews. It was a book that had cost $2.99 in Walmart's clearance section. There was a smiley face sticker on the cover. I found it in the discount section at Barnes & Noble, Mom explained, sounding pleased with herself. It should help you. There is lots of practical advice in there. A friend of mine read it and said it completely changed her approach to job hunting. I flipped through the book. Most pages had dog-eared corners, and someone had previously highlighted several passages with a yellow marker. This was obviously a used book that Mom was trying to pass off as new. And this, Mom continued, handing me another small package. Inside was a cheap polyester professional scarf with a faded striped pattern. The tag was still attached, showing a price of $7.09 for looking more professional when you go to interviews, Mom said, her voice full of fake concern. You know, first impressions matter. This scarf will make you look more mature, more professional. Aunt Carol nodded approvingly. Yes, Zara, she is right about that. You are a bit too casual. This will help. I sat there, trying to control my reaction. Dominique wouldn't look at me. This was embarrassing even for her. Sebastian was trying not to laugh. Thank you, I said, working to keep my voice steady. You are welcome, dear. Mom said in the voice you use with a child who needs encouragement to tie their shoes. We just want to help you. This comes from love. You need to start taking your future seriously eventually. Maybe the book will give you some ideas, Dad added. After all, you've been trying your own approach for 3 years now, and obviously it is not working. Scarlett nodded in agreement. I mean, you can't live on your parents' financial support forever. That assumption that I was dependent on their support stung, but I didn't argue. There was no point. If I tried to explain that I was supporting myself, they would ask how that was possible, considering I had no real job. Maybe the new year will bring change, Sebastian said, biting into another cookie. Maybe 2025 will be the year you finally find stability. Life becomes easier when you have a real job, Scarlett agreed. Really, Zara, you should listen to us. Please, Zara, Mom said, make a real commitment in January to find something stable. No more of this freelance consulting nonsense. You are almost 30. It is time to seriously consider your future, without a safety net. Without a safety net. I placed the scarf on my lap, the second-hand book beside it, filled with some stranger's notes and markings. This is how they saw me. Someone who needed cheap self-help books and Walmart scarves to look professional. Someone who needed to be told how important it was to find a job. Someone who had nothing to rely on but their limited sympathy. Thank you all, I said calmly. I appreciate it. I didn't. But there was no point in saying so. The television volume suddenly increased. My nephew had grabbed the remote and accidentally hit the volume button while reaching for another cookie. Breaking news on this Christmas evening. The CNN anchor's voice filled the room. We interrupt holiday programming to bring you major technology news that has been developing throughout the day. Turn it down, honey, Scarlett said to her son, but the screen had already changed. CNN logo, red breaking news letters, and a headline. Mysterious tech founder identity revealed. The anonymous founder of one of America's fastest-growing healthcare technology companies, Dataflow Solutions, has finally been confirmed, the anchor continued. For 3 years, the company maintained strict privacy about its leadership, but CNN has exclusively learned. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Lisa, my co-founder. I know you are with your family. I am so sorry. The story leaked early. It is everywhere. Dataflow Solutions made headlines earlier this year with a $180 million funding round, the anchor said. The company's revolutionary medical analytics platform has been adopted by over 400 hospitals nationwide and is believed to have saved approximately 10,000 lives through improved patient outcome predictions. Mom reached for the remote. Let's find something more appropriate for the holidays. Wait, Sebastian said, sitting up straighter. That company name sounds familiar. The founder, who has been operating under strict anonymity for 3 years, has now been confirmed as 29-year-old Zara Blackwood, former Microsoft engineer who left 3 years ago to start the company from her Seattle apartment. The room fell into absolute silence. My photo appeared on screen. Not just any photo, but my official press photo, taken last month for a Forbes technology feature that was supposed to be published in January. Somehow, CNN had obtained it early. It was a picture of me in a well-tailored business suit in an executive office, with our Seattle headquarters skyline in the background. That is, Aunt Carol pointed at the screen, her voice trembling. That is Zara. Sterling's wine glass slipped from his rigid fingers. Red wine splashing across the expensive Persian rug. No one moved to clean it up. According to sources close to the company, Blackwood personally owns 68% of Dataflow Solutions, which at the current valuation of $21 billion, puts her personal net worth at approximately $14 billion. Dominique made a choking sound and nearly spit out the champagne she was drinking. As a senior vice president at Morgan Stanley, she immediately understood what these numbers meant. $14 billion in personal net worth. That made Zara wealthier than any client she had ever managed, wealthier than anyone she knew. This can't be true, Mom whispered, her face going pale. Zara, you? The broadcast continued, as if to ensure no one missed any details. Blackwood, who graduated from MIT with degrees in computer science and biomedical engineering, began developing Dataflow's core technology while still employed at Microsoft. The platform uses advanced machine learning algorithms to analyze patient data in real time, helping healthcare providers predict complications, optimize treatment plans, and allocate resources more effectively. They cut to hospital footage. I recognized it as Johns Hopkins. A doctor in scrubs stood in what looked like a busy ICU. Dataflow has completely revolutionized how we practice medicine, the doctor said. The predictive accuracy is unlike anything we've ever seen. Since implementation, our ICU patient mortality rates have decreased by 23%. Zara Blackwood's technology is saving lives every single day. Sebastian's phone dropped to the floor. He stared at the television as if it had just told him aliens had landed on the White House lawn. Back to the studio anchor. The CDC recently awarded Dataflow Solutions a $300 million contract to build a national pandemic preparedness and response system. The company, which began with just 2 employees, now employs 85 people across offices in Seattle, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Dominique picked up Sebastian's phone and frantically began typing. As a financial professional, she needed to verify all of this. It is real, she murmured, scrolling through Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, Forbes. Oh my God, it is all real. Theodore began calculating, his lawyer brain trying to process these numbers. $21 billion company valuation, 68% ownership, that means $14 billion. Dominique said automatically, her years of training at Morgan Stanley kicking in. Zara owns approximately $14 billion worth of stock. She paused, letting the weight of that shock settle. I manage $50 million in client assets, and your daily passive income is more than my annual salary. Room fell into another heavy silence as reality crashed down on everyone simultaneously. In approximately 10 minutes, my entire family had gone from assuming I was a failure they needed to rescue, to realizing I had always been the most successful person in the room. And they had spent 3 years treating me with cheap gifts and condescending advice. Blackwood has maintained a very low profile, rarely giving interviews and never appearing at industry conferences, the anchor continued. But those who have worked with her describe her as a brilliant, driven innovator who is fundamentally changing healthcare technology. They played footage from a medical technology conference. A moderator was speaking. Dataflow's founder is a genius, absolutely revolutionary work. The fact that she accomplished this before 30 while maintaining complete anonymity is extraordinary. Wait, Scarlett said weakly. You own a multi-billion-dollar company. 21 billion. Dominique corrected mechanically, her brain still trying to process the reality. As a wealth management expert, she had seen plenty of rich people, but wealth on this scale. This was the largest personal net worth she had encountered in her career. The television switched to another image. A screenshot from a Forbes article that wasn't supposed to be published until January. The headline read, "The Invisible Billionaire, How Zara Blackwood Built Healthcare's Secret Empire." Mom made a broken groaning sound. We gave you a self-help book and a $7 scarf. And you? Suddenly, the cheap polyester scarf sitting on the couch seemed to mock her. So did the second-hand copy of Get Hired. All the advice about finding employment, all the assumptions, all the condescension. Dad's face turned deep red as the weight of realization fell on him. He had just given his daughter, now worth $14 billion, a clearance rack scarf that had been sitting in Walmart for months. Scarlett's mouth hung open as she realized all the advice she had given this woman just hours ago about LinkedIn, about personal branding, about the importance of finding work had been directed at someone who had built one of the most revolutionary companies in the healthcare industry. Joining us now is technology analyst David Chen, the CNN anchor said. David, help us understand the significance of data flow solutions in the healthcare industry. A new face appeared in split screen. This is the most important healthcare innovation in a decade, the analyst said. What Zara Blackwood built isn't just a successful company. This is technology that is fundamentally changing how medicine is practiced. The predictive algorithms are so accurate that hospitals using data flow are seeing measurably better patient outcomes. We're talking about thousands of lives saved, and she accomplished this in 3 years. Starting from nothing? The anchor asked. Starting from her apartment, initially self-funded, then small angel investment rounds. She maintained absolute control of the company, refusing to give up decision-making authority even as funding increased. This is almost unheard of in tech. Most founders get diluted down to minority ownership. Blackwood kept 68%. It is a combination of exceptional business strategy and revolutionary technology. Sebastian stared at the television, then at me. All those times you said you were working on hospital projects. You meant Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and Cleveland Clinic, Presbyterian, Mount Sinai. I confirmed. Oh my God, he whispered. I work at Presbyterian. We use your system. I've been using your technology and didn't even know it. Dominique picked up her phone again, scrolling through more articles. There is a Wall Street Journal analysis here. Says if data flow goes public at current growth trajectories, it could be worth $500 billion. She looked up at me. That would make your stake worth about $340 billion. The room fell silent again. Mom's eyes fell to the scarf, then to me. We gave you a book about how to find a job, a $7.99 scarf. Dad whispered, as if he were tallying up his own humiliation. We gave our daughter a cheap scarf to help her look more professional, and he couldn't finish the sentence. I was giving you advice about personal branding. Scarlett said, her voice carrying a dry kind of collapse. I was lecturing someone who owns a globally recognized brand about personal branding. Theodore was reassessing the entire situation. About your law firm. I mean, if you need legal counsel, I have the finest legal team in the world. I said calmly, including a former attorney general as advisor. Sterling's face reddened. He had just realized he had been offering career advice to someone who probably had better legal representation than he had ever seen. Wait, Dominique said, reading another article. Forbes says your company's revenue last year was $870 million. If you own 68%, she did quick calculations. Your annual income share is over $500 million. That means you earn more than $1.5 million every day. She paused to let that number sink in. She said almost in a whisper, "You make more money in one day than I make in 4 years." And my mother gave me a cheap professional scarf. I noted calmly, as if that would help me look mature enough in case I decided to apply for a job at Starbucks. Everyone in the room stared at that scarf as if it had suddenly become some kind of satirical art piece. $7.99 of polyester, representing all the contempt, all the distrust, all the assumptions. Dominique was still processing the financial reality. "I've been trying to get data flow as one of our clients," she said quietly. "I even mentioned them in our client team meetings. About this mysterious healthcare tech company and their incredible returns. I've been bragging about a company my little sister owns, without even knowing it." She paused as the weight of reality became heavier. "Not just owns." Theodore corrected, still reading his phone. "Founded and operates. It says here she is the CEO and founder. She built the entire thing from nothing." "I tried to offer her an assistant job," Theodore continued, his voice carrying some strange mixture of awe and shame. "I offered an assistant position." Sebastian looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. "When you said you were working on hospital projects, you meant you were building the system Johns Hopkins is using?" "Yes, and you never told us the scale." I tried. "You didn't want to hear it." The television had moved to showing footage of our Boston office. Employees walked through modern workspace, working at standing desks, collaborating in glass-walled conference rooms. Dataflow's corporate culture is reportedly exceptional, the reporter's voiceover said. Blackwood is known for prioritizing employee well-being, offering generous benefits, and maintaining a clear mission-driven environment. Employee reviews consistently rank it as one of the best places to work in tech. Aunt Carol suddenly stood up and walked to the window as if she needed to sit down to prevent fainting. "Across the street, there are photographers setting up equipment," she said, pointing outside. Dad went over to look. There were, indeed, dozens of people with professional cameras and lighting equipment all pointed toward our house. "They found you this quickly?" he asked, turning to me. "I am not hard to find." Once the identity was revealed, every reporter in the country started digging. This will be, all the newspapers will." Mom couldn't complete a thought. "Yes," I confirmed. "All the newspapers in the country, probably international news too." Dominique was still scrolling, her financial training fully activated. "It says here you turned down a $900 million acquisition offer from Google last year." The entire room stopped breathing. $900 million. Dad repeated, as if the number might change if he said it again. "You turned down $900 million. His voice cracked. "I turned it down because I believe in the mission," I said calmly. "Not for the money, not for the money," he repeated, as if this concept was too absurd for him to understand. "Zara, $900 million. You could never work again. You could retire 10 times over. You could own private islands. I don't want private islands. I want to save lives." Vivienne was still staring at the scarf, the second-hand book. Her eyes were filling with tears. "I gave you a $7.99 scarf," she said quietly. "I told you how important it was to find a job. I gave you a used self-help book like you were some high school graduate who needed basic career advice." "Mom." "No, wait," she interrupted, her voice firm now. "I need to say this. I need to acknowledge this. I've been treating you like a failure. I've been speaking to you with condescension. I've been assuming you didn't know what you were doing. Her voice broke. "I've been thinking I was smarter, thinking I was helping you, thinking I was teaching you about real life. She wiped her face with her hands. And you've been building a multi-billion-dollar company, saving thousands of lives. Becoming one of the most innovative thinkers of your generation. Sterling looked at me, his lawyer face. The expression he had cultivated over years to maintain control and authority in courtrooms, now crumbling. I gave you career advice, he said. I suggested you consider administrative work. I suggested you get a stable job. I suggested you learn how to live like a successful person. And you were doing all of that. You were doing all of it all along. The television continued its coverage, now showing a photo of me in our Seattle office, wearing my usual black hoodie and jeans, in a room full of young engineers who were all looking at me with expressions of respect. Blackwood is known for her commitment to work-life balance, the anchor said. She insists that innovation shouldn't come from overwork or burnout. Dataflow employees report working 40-hour weeks with unlimited vacation, full family benefits, and mental health support. This approach is working. Employee retention rates are among the highest in tech. Scarlett suddenly stood up. I need fresh air. She walked to the front door and opened it. Despite the cold, just standing there as if she needed to escape this room, this reality. The twins who had been playing with toys in the corner finally spoke up. Is Aunt Zara famous? No one answered. No one could answer. The room was filled with a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by television commentary about how Dataflow Solutions was transforming modern medicine. Theodore cleared his throat. I need to acknowledge something. When I offered you assistant work at my practice, I meant I was offering minimum wage work to someone who owns a $21 billion company. He paused. I am a lawyer who has been practicing for 25 years, and I just offered assistant work to someone who possesses more wealth than any client I've ever seen. He sat down as if his legs could no longer support him. Dominique closed her phone. I can't process this, she said, her voice barely audible. I spent my entire adult life trying to be successful. I went to the right schools, got the right jobs, worked for the right companies. I am proud to manage $50 million in assets. And my sister exceeded me by 1,000 times while I didn't even realize what she was doing. This isn't a competition, I said. Yes, for you it is not, she said with a strange, twisted smile. Because you already won. You won in ways I'll never win. You've achieved what I dreamed of. And you didn't even bother to tell us. Mom came over and sat beside me. She looked older, her face seemed to have sagged in the past 5 minutes. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, her voice full of hurt confusion. I am your mother. Why couldn't you tell your mother? I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who raised me, loved me, but never believed in me. This woman who thought she knew what was best for me, even when I told her repeatedly otherwise. Because, I said calmly, every time I tried to tell you something, you told me I was wrong. You told me it wasn't real work. You told me I needed to be more practical. You told me I should listen to smarter people. Whether that smarter person was you or Sebastian or Dominique, I didn't. Mom began. Yes, you did, I continued, my voice remaining calm but firm. I remember Christmas 2 years ago. I gave you an article about our company. A serious article from a medical journal discussing how Dataflow was changing patient care. You said, "Oh, that is nice, dear." Then you asked me when I was going to start working, for real. Mom's face showed a mixture of guilt and denial. Or Thanksgiving 3 years ago, I continued. When I explained we had received seed funding, I tried to tell you about our negotiations with Mayo Clinic. You interrupted me to say you hoped I wouldn't get too excited about a possible scam. You actually used air quotes around possible scam. Zara. At that time that was a new company. I was just protecting you, she began defending herself. Protecting me, I repeated, my calm now having a sharp edge. Or not believing in me, protecting me or showing contempt for me, because if you wanted to protect me, you would have asked questions. You would have said, tell me more. Explain this. Help me understand. Instead of immediately assuming I was doing something foolish that needed to be rescued from. Dad was listening, his face getting redder and redder. I remember when you tried to explain funding to us, he said slowly, realization now fully hitting him. You said you had raised $15 million. I told you that sounded like a get-rich-quick scheme. I told you to be careful, as if you were some gullible person who could be easily fooled. You said I should find a real job to maintain a foundation, I confirmed. You said business startups were risky. You said I shouldn't depend on unreliable venture capital. And now you have a $180 million Series B round, Dominique said softly. And you keep refusing more. Because I don't need it, I said. What I needed was trust. What I needed was support. What I needed was for my family to believe I knew what I was doing. Another phone started ringing. Then another. Aunt Carol answered hers with shaking hands. Yes, that is my niece, she said unsteadily. Yes, the one on CNN. No, we didn't know. We thought she was unemployed. After she hung up, she looked like she was going to faint. That was Margaret from my book club. She saw the news, she said. She said the whole town is talking. Mom's phone started buzzing frantically. Text after text. She glanced at the screen, then put it down as if it had burned her. Asking why we never mentioned you were. She couldn't finish the sentence. Dad walked to the window, looking outside. The number of photographers had increased. I could see camera flashes twinkling like fireflies. How many people are out there? He asked, his voice containing something I had never heard before, pure, simple fear of reality. At least 50, I said, checking the security cameras on my phone. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow morning, it'll be twice as many. Theodore stood up and went to his own phone. He began making calls. Hi, yes, I need a lawyer recommendation. Good legal representation. No, not for me. It is for my sister-in-law. No, I can't explain in more detail. Just trust me, she needs the best. Sebastian had been staring at the television, which was now showing footage of Dataflow office spaces. I could see my team there, young, smart, brilliant, led by a woman whose family members they didn't even know they were trying to help. 3 years, he said slowly. You've been doing this for 3 years, and I didn't even realize. You weren't particularly interested in me, I said, not cruelly, just stating fact. I was always a project to you, someone who needed fixing, someone who couldn't get on track. Dominique looked up. If Dataflow goes public this year, would your wealth increase? Probably by a lot. Analysts predict at least $500 billion valuation. She stared at me for a long moment. I was the smartest person in my class throughout school, she said slowly. I went to Ivy League universities. I got my dream job. I've been trying to be the most successful Blackwood. She paused, and all this time, my sister was building an empire under a name I didn't even know. Aunt Carol sat on the couch, looking like she had just experienced a mental earthquake. We all thought you were wasting your potential, she said. We all kind of pitied you, like you were a smart girl who just couldn't figure out how to use it. I know, I said. I always knew. That is why I stopped trying to explain. Mom covered her face with her hands. You should have been proud of this, she said, her voice coming through her fingers. You should have come and told us. You should have let us do our job as your mother and father. Which was what? I asked. Or try to tell me how to do better. Be proud of you, she said, taking her hands from her face. Her eyes were red. Just be proud of you. On television, CNN's analyst was discussing Dataflow's long-term impact on the healthcare industry. We're talking about technology that could change how medicine is practiced worldwide, he said. Zara Blackwood didn't just create a successful company, she created the future. Dad turned around to face me. I am sorry, he said, the words seeming too small, too useless. I am sorry I didn't. I am sorry. The room fell into another heavy silence. In about 10 minutes, I had gone from assuming I was a failure they needed to save, to realizing I had always been the most successful person in the room. And they had spent 3 years treating me with cheap gifts and condescending advice. News teams have arrived, Aunt Carol suddenly said, pointing outside. A truck with the CNN logo was slowly driving down the street, looking for the way to our house. I need to leave, I said calmly. You can't leave, Mom said, panicked. Zara, this is Christmas. Christmas ended 3 hours ago, I said, standing up. When CNN decided to reveal my identity on national broadcast, I walked toward the coat rack. Zara, please, Dad said. Please, we need to talk. We had 3 years to talk, I said. During those 3 years, you chose not to listen to anything I said. That is true, but now we want to listen. Now we understand. Now you understand. Because CNN told you, I interrupted, my voice carrying a bitterness I couldn't hide, not because of my words, but because of a television network I put on my coat. This is the problem, I continued. You didn't believe your daughter. You believed a news channel. You needed external validation. You needed an authority source to tell you who I was before you could start taking me seriously. Mom stood up. Zara, that is not fair. We did our best as parents. I know you think so, I said. That is the problem. The doorbell rang. They're here, Theodore said. I looked at my family, my parents, my sister, my brother and his wife, my aunt, people who couldn't understand who they had been talking to all along. I need to get back to Seattle, I said. Manage all of this. Now, Dad asked. Yes, now. Aunt Carol's phone rang again. This time she answered it, listened for a moment, then said, yes, I can comment. She paused. Yes, Zara Blackwood is my niece. We're all very proud of her. She hung up. That was the New York Times, she said quietly. Another phone rang. Then another. My phone vibrated in my pocket constantly, like some living thing trying to escape. I walked toward the door. Zara, Mom said, her voice crying. Before you go, I need you to know how proud I am of you, how sorry I am, how much I love you. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. I know you love me, Mom, I said. You always have. But love and respect are different things. You loved me, but you never respected me. Not until tonight. When CNN told you I was worth respecting, I opened the door. The photographers immediately began taking pictures. Zara Blackwood. A reporter shouted. Do you have anything to say? No comment, I said, walking past them toward my car. Zara, are the numbers real? Do you really own a $21 billion company? No comment. I got into my Honda Civic, that simple, unremarkable car that perfectly represented the life I had chosen. One that didn't need designer cars or flashy displays of wealth to prove my worth. As I backed out of the driveway, I could see my family in the windows watching me. Mom was still crying. Dad had his hand on her shoulder. Sebastian, Dominique, and their spouses all stood there, looking like they had just experienced an earthquake and the house was still shaking. My phone rang. Lisa, hey, I said, connecting to Bluetooth. God, are you okay? Yeah, I am driving back to Seattle. How did you tell them? I didn't tell them, I said. CNN told them, at Christmas dinner. Oh no, how did they take it? I thought about my father's face when he realized he had given me a $7.99 scarf. I thought about my mother's despair. I thought about Dominique trying to process that she had spent 35 years trying to become the most successful Blackwood while her sister had been building an empire under a name she didn't even know. They were shocked, I finally said. They should be proud, Lisa said. You should tell them to be proud. They'll figure it out, I said. Eventually, I drove through the streets toward the highway, toward Seattle, toward what I had built. Away from a life they never really wanted to understand. At least, not until CNN explained it to them. As I merged onto Interstate 95, heading toward the airport where my company jet waited, I reflected on the evening's events. The weight of revelation hung heavy in the winter air. For 29 years, I had been Zara Blackwood, daughter, sister, the family disappointment who couldn't seem to find her way. Tonight, in the span of a CNN broadcast, I had become someone entirely different in their eyes. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family had been worrying about my lack of direction, I had been quietly revolutionizing an entire industry. While they debated my need for stability and benefits, I had been creating technology that was literally keeping people alive in hospitals across the nation. While they offered me entry-level positions and career advice, I had been building something that would outlast us all. My phone continued buzzing with notifications. Text messages from former colleagues at Microsoft expressing amazement, emails from journalists requesting interviews, calls from investors who had been trying to reach me for months. The carefully constructed anonymity I had maintained for 3 years had crumbled in a matter of hours. I thought about the expression on Sebastian's face when he realized he had been using my technology at Presbyterian Hospital. The slow dawn of understanding as he connected the dots between the mysterious sister who played with computers and the revolutionary platform that had been transforming his daily medical practice. For months, he had been saving lives using algorithms I had designed, never knowing that the family member he considered directionless was the person responsible. Dominique's reaction had been perhaps the most telling. As someone immersed in the world of high finance, she understood better than anyone what $14 billion actually meant. She had spent her career managing wealth for others, had built her identity around being the successful financial expert in the family. Learning that her younger sister possessed more wealth than all of her clients combined had fundamentally shifted her understanding of success, of family dynamics, of everything she thought she knew about the world. The cheap polyester scarf seemed to symbolize everything wrong with how my family had perceived me. $7.99 worth of fabric, purchased from a clearance rack, given with the sincere belief that it would help me look professional enough to land an entry-level position somewhere. The condescension embedded in that gift was breathtaking. Not just the low dollar amount, but the assumption that I needed basic guidance on professional presentation. That I was someone who required remedial help with career fundamentals. That secondhand self-help book, Get Hired, 27 Ways to Land Job Interviews, filled with some strangers highlighting and margin notes, represented 3 years of my family's assumptions about my life. They had genuinely believed I was struggling with basic employment concepts, that I needed instruction on how to present myself to potential employers, that my problem was simply a lack of knowledge about job searching techniques. The reality was more complex and more painful. My family's inability to understand my work wasn't just about technology or industry knowledge. It was about respect, about the fundamental assumption that I was competent to make my own decisions. When I had tried to explain data flow in its early stages, they hadn't asked clarifying questions or expressed interest in learning more. They had immediately jumped to protective mode, assuming I was being naive or unrealistic. I remembered the conversation 2 years earlier when I had mentioned our first major hospital contract. Instead of curiosity about what we were building or pride in my accomplishment, Mom's immediate response was concern that I was being taken advantage of. "These big companies sometimes take advantage of small contractors," she had said. "Make sure you are protected legally." The assumption that I was the vulnerable party in negotiations with major medical institutions revealed how fundamentally they misunderstood my position. Dad's legal mind had been similarly dismissive. When I mentioned raising venture capital, his immediate response was to warn me about giving up too much equity and making sure I understood the terms. Sound advice for someone entering their first business deal. But I had already been through multiple funding rounds with some of the most sophisticated investors in technology. I had negotiated from a position of strength, maintaining majority control precisely because I understood these dynamics better than he realized. The assumption that I was financially dependent on my parents had been particularly galling. Multiple times over the past 3 years, family members had made comments about my need to become financially independent or stop relying on family support. The reality was that I had been financially independent since my 2nd year at Dataflow, and by the 3rd year, my personal income exceeded the combined earnings of everyone in that room. But perhaps the most hurtful aspect was the emotional dependency implicit in their attitude. They had acted as if my happiness and self-worth should be tied to their approval, as if their concerns about my choices were more important than my own assessment of my life. They had spoken about my future with the authority of people who understood my situation better than I did, never considering that I might have information and perspective they lacked. The irony extended beyond mere career success. While they worried about my lack of traditional stability, I had been creating something far more secure than any conventional job. While they concerned themselves with my retirement planning, I had built wealth that could support multiple generations. While they questioned my judgment about work-life balance, I had created a company culture that prioritized employee well-being and sustainable practices. Their vision of success had been narrow, conventional, and ultimately small. They measured achievement in terms of recognizable job titles, steady paychecks, and social approval. They couldn't conceptualize success that operated outside those parameters, that created value in ways they didn't immediately understand. As I drove through the Connecticut countryside toward the airport, I considered what this revelation would mean for our family dynamics going forward. Would they be able to genuinely recalibrate their understanding of who I was? Or would they simply overlay new assumptions onto their existing framework? Would they ask me about my work with real curiosity? Or would they assume that my success somehow validated their previous concerns? There was a part of me that felt vindicated. Certainly, 3 years of condescending advice and worried conversations had been revealed as fundamentally misguided. Every suggestion that I needed to be more practical, every implication that I was wasting my potential, every gift intended to help me succeed in conventional terms, all of it had been based on a complete misunderstanding of reality. But vindication felt hollow when it came at the cost of genuine understanding. I would have preferred for my family to recognize my competence and achievements through our actual conversations, through their willingness to listen and learn about my work, rather than through external validation from news media. The fact that it took CNN to make them take me seriously said something profound about the limitations of our relationship. The media attention would bring its own complications. Privacy had been crucial to my ability to build data flow without distraction. Operating anonymously had allowed me to focus on product development and company building without the pressures that come with public recognition. Now that anonymity was gone permanently, replaced by intense scrutiny from business media, potential competitors, and the general public, my team would also be affected. We had deliberately built a culture focused on the work itself, on the mission of improving healthcare outcomes through technology. Sudden celebrity for the CEO could shift that dynamic in unpredictable ways. Some team members might feel uncomfortable with the attention. Others might seek to capitalize on it. Managing that transition while maintaining our company's core values would require careful leadership. The investment community would react as well. We had intentionally stayed private longer than many comparable companies, turning down acquisition offers and additional funding rounds because we wanted to maintain control over our direction. Public attention might increase pressure to either go public or accept acquisition offers, creating new tensions around the company's future. But perhaps most significantly, this revelation would change how I moved through the world personally. The anonymity that had allowed me to live relatively normally was gone. Simple activities like going to coffee shops, attending conferences, or traveling would now carry the complications that come with public recognition. The quiet, focused life I had built around my work would need to accommodate an entirely new reality. As I pulled into the private aviation terminal at Westchester County Airport, I made peace with these changes. The work itself remained the same. Dataflow's mission to improve patient outcomes through better data analysis hadn't changed because CNN had broadcast my name. The algorithms still functioned the same way. The hospital partnerships still delivered the same value. The lives being saved were still being saved. What had changed was my family's understanding of who I was. Whether that would lead to better relationships or simply different kinds of misunderstanding remained to be seen. But for the first time in 3 years, they would have to acknowledge that I knew what I was doing. The company jet was waiting, engines already warming up for the flight to Seattle. As I boarded, my phone continued its incessant buzzing with calls and messages from around the world. The story had gone global while I was driving, picked up by international business news, technology publications, and general media outlets. I settled into my seat and opened my laptop to begin managing the communications crisis this had created. Our company's communications team had been caught completely off guard by the early leak of information. Scrambling to develop messaging strategy and coordinate responses to media requests. Lisa had been fielding calls from our investors, all of whom were surprised by the sudden exposure, but generally supportive. Our board of directors was scheduling an emergency meeting to discuss implications and strategy. Hospital partners were calling to confirm that the leadership change, from their perspective, wouldn't affect our service delivery. But as the plane lifted off and Connecticut disappeared below us, I found myself thinking not about business logistics, but about that moment when my mother realized she had given me a $7 scarf as career advice. The expression on her face when she understood the magnitude of her misperception. The way the entire room had fallen silent as 3 years of assumptions crumbled in real time. Perhaps this forced revelation would ultimately prove beneficial. Perhaps my family would finally be able to see me clearly without the filter of their expectations and concerns. Perhaps we could build relationships based on who we actually were, rather than who they thought I should become. Or perhaps they would simply replace one set of assumptions with another, treating me now as some kind of business oracle rather than as their daughter and sister who happened to be good with technology and determined to help people through her work. Time would tell. But as Seattle's skyline appeared ahead of us, I felt ready for whatever came next. I had built something meaningful, something that made the world better in measurable ways. No amount of family misunderstanding or media attention could change that fundamental truth. The work continued, the mission remained. And for the first time in 3 years, my family finally knew who they were talking to. As we descended toward Seattle, I could see the data flow building among the other tech campuses south of the city. Our offices would be busy tomorrow, managing the sudden influx of attention and maintaining normal operations while the world suddenly knew who we were. But tonight, I would return to the life I had built, the team I had assembled, the technology we continued to develop. I would return to work that mattered, regardless of whether my family understood it or not. The difference was that now, finally, they would have to acknowledge that understanding might be worthwhile. That is the story for today. Hope you enjoyed this incredible tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more captivating stories like this, and don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you for being here. See you next time.